Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're doing another installment of the weekly meta breakdown where we look at the top performing decks on the MTG Arena ladder. This particular video I'm actually going to be covering both historic best of 1 and get some details on best of 3 format. There's not a huge amount of data available for best of 3 right now, but we got a couple deck lists that I want to share. We haven't been able to really touch base on the best of 3 format that frequent recently, but the core of what we're trying to do here is see what are the best performing decks on the ladder. We're getting these stats from the Untapped GG companion tool, which you see on screen. It runs alongside your Arena client, tracks your win rates, loss rates, aggregates it into a whole data set that we can slice and dice views, has in-game overlays, whole bunch of cool features in there as well, tells you what decks you can build based on your collection. Link is in the video description if you want to get started today. There's a whole bunch of features for free. I'll also paste all these deck lists into the video description, so if you're interested, just copy paste net deck to your heart's desire, which I strongly encourage for people to have fun with the game. As always, if you can, I have a goal to try to hit 10,000 subs by June. We broke 7,000 earlier in January, so if you haven't subbed to the channel yet, it's free. Just click the button. Helps me out a lot, costs you nothing, and helps me kind of keep churning out this content week after week. So we're going to jump into it. Enough pandering. Top decks of the week. We go to Izzet Wizards. Number 1 deck of the week in terms of win rate, 67.5%. This Wizards deck has been around for a while. It's consistently put up results. It's usually in like the 60% range. It's a very powerful, explosive deck and can kind of attack on a number of different angles. You have a bunch of burn spells, which allow you to control your opponent's board between Play with Fire, Static Discharge, and Lightning Strike. You have a bunch of card advantage and Mentor's Guidance, as well as Expressive Iteration. And the big thing of this deck is you have a lot of ways to enable Dreadhorde Arcanist to have greater than 1 power, which allows you to flash back your 2 and 3 mana spells in this deck. And you're doing that through like Symmetry Sage or Balmor as ways to kind of increase its power, along with Reckless Charge. So the biggest like kind of downside with Dreadhorde Arcanist, a lot of times it's a 2 mana spell that you just cast and then it immediately gets killed. Dreadhorde's great as soon as you start attacking with it, but you need to be able to attack with it. The Reckless Charge lets you kind of just burst out huge amounts of damage out of nowhere. Plays really nicely with Symmetry Sage. You know, you do turn 1 Symmetry Sage, turn 2 like another Symmetry Sage or a Soulscar Mage, you Reckless Charge. It's like 9 damage coming through between the pumps and stuff like that. So it could do huge chunks of damage kind of mixed into there. You also have some copies of Consider and a Spikefield Hazard tucked away in there. This is also Jengantha companion deck as well. Sometimes you just got to moose beats. The next deck of the week is Rakdos Midrange. So this is kind of a beefed up version of what we get in Explorer, 64.5% win rate. And this is a deck that's looking to just have a lot of interaction. So you can attack your opponent's hand with Inquisition and Thoughtseize. A lot of cheap removal in Fatal Push. Angrath's Rampage is a flexible removal spell where you can target creatures, artifacts, or planeswalkers for your, well, not target, but make your opponent sacrifice. Some Croxas for Curse of Graveyard threats. Blood Tithe can be used as removal. You have your Fable package. Fable with like Seasoned Pyromancer is really nice with Blood Tithe Harvester. Seasoned Pyromancer with Shieldred gains you a lot of life. And then notably, if late game, if you draw these, you can ditch them to the Pyro as well or to the Fable. So there's a lot of ways to kind of insulate playing a bunch of 1 mana discard cards late into the game. Shelly's really powerful. Chandra for card advantage. Liliana to attack your opponent's hand as well. So a lot of angles of attack in this deck, and we'll also see this deck in the best of 3 format with a slightly different variation. Mana base, you got a lot of ways to kind of utilize between channel lands, creature lands kind of mixed into there, as well as a castle tucked away in here. We then go to the combo deck of the format. One of the more prevalent ones is Izzet Belcher, 61% win rate. And this deck is a deck with no lands, but with lands. The core of the deck is you want to cast Goblin Charbelcher. The entire deck is built around this card. And 4 mana, 3 to activate, basically with this deck, because you don't have lands in the sense all you're playing is these module dual-faced lands from Zendikar. You basically flip your entire deck and deal damage to your opponent equal to the number of cards in your deck. So it's kind of a one-shot kill. You can, as early as turn 3, cast it through Irencrag Feat. Irencrag gives you exactly 7 mana, enough to cast and activate the Charbelcher. You make treasure tokens with Magma Opus or the Spikefield Hazard to kind of bridge you to that point to get an earlier turn. With the treasure tokens as well, you can cast Indomitable Creativity on them, which lets you always flip into the Char Belcher because it's the only artifact in the deck. You're able to protect yourself through the combo through Pact of Negation, notably Ironcrag Feat. If you cast the Ironcrag Feat and they try to counter the feat, you can Pact, like, so how it kind of works with this is a little strict, because this has a restriction, you can only cast one spell per turn. So if you cast the feat, you can't Pact their thing because that counts. No, so you can cast the feat. If they try to counter the feat, you could counter their spell. But if they try to counter the Belcher, which is the correct line, if they cast the Belcher, that is their one spell condition, so then you can't cast the Pact. So note with that, you are going to be in a counter war if you're on the other side of it. Counter the Belcher, don't counter the Ironcrag Feat, because you restrict them in terms of the one spell cast condition. Just stack-wise. It just kind of gets a little confusing, but this is a deck that it's kind of boring to play, so just keep that in mind if you're crafting this. I've won with it, but I don't enjoy playing it. We then go to Azorius Control, the top deck last week, fallen down a bit, 59%. This is a deck that's looking to say no in a variety of ways. This version is playing the 9 lives Solemnity lock. So 9 lives says if you were to dealt damage, you put a counter on it instead. So you cancel out that damage. When it has 9 lives, because it's a cat, you die. Or if it leaves the battlefield, you die. Solemnity says you can't get counters. So Solemnity prevents you from putting counters on the 9 lives. You're effectively creating a lock where your opponent can't deal damage to you. There's a couple conditions that can get around this. There's Stomp from Bone Crusher Giant. There's Questing Beast. Anything that says damage cannot be prevented this turn gets around the lock. Also, just be mindful, farewells, stuff like that can target the 9 lives as well. Outside of the deck, you just got a lot of interaction. Mana Tide, Jawari, Archmage Charm, Absorb. There's lots of counters, Divine Purge to kind of sweep up stuff, along with Supreme Verdict. Wandering Emperor, Teferi, and then Kaleem are kind of your win conditions of the deck. And then you got some utility lands mixed into here, a hall, a castle, all kind of mixed in there as well. This is a Yorion companion deck. You then go to Boros Affinity, one of the more aggressive decks of the format, along with the Izzet Wizards deck. So this deck here is built around Retrofitter Foundry, which the last ability to sacrifice a Thopter to create a 4/4. So normally you'd have to, like, some assembly required, you know, tap and tap, tap and tap. But with this deck here, you're just getting a bunch of Thopters. So you have like Ornithopter, which is 0 mana. So on turn 1, you can have a 4/4. You have Barb Spike, which makes a Thopter. You have Yotai, which also creates a Thopter. So all ways to kind of use the fitter to create 4/4s for free. You have Esper Sentinel for tax, Ingenious Smith to find stuff, Mashiko to power up your team, Shadow Sphere for lifelink and trample, especially pairs really nice with the Mashiko. Toolcraft in this deck is a 1 mana 3/2 first striker when it attacks based on your artifacts, kind of mixed into there. That was a 59% win rate deck. We then go to Mono Red Aggro. So we see a similar deck to this in Explorer as well. The kind of bonus you get in this format is Reckless Ringleader, which allows you to give a card in your hand Perpetually Haste. Plays really nice with things like Annex, just to be able to push through a bunch of additional damage. This version here is on on Rampaging Ferocidon, and you're kind of going into Turbo Ember Cleave. Try to go as wide as possible, and then Ember Cleave your opponent out of the game. 23 lands is probably a little light. I usually like 24 in these decks when you're going up this high on curve. You really want to get to 4 mana, and generally speaking, between like Ramanap Ruins, Castle Embereths, Den of the Bugbear, Sokazen, you have a lot of ways to spend your mana outside of just casting spells. But this is a quite powerful deck, can catch people up slipping, and the Ferocidons do a nice job against the life gain decks. We then go to a different variation of Mono Red. This is Mono Red Burn. So I played a deck very similar to this in Best of 3 that got me Mythic. I don't suggest playing Torbran. It's win more in this deck. It's too slow with the rest of the cards you're playing, and your curve's fairly low. You're also only on 22 lands. I do like Chandra 4. So while you're at the same condition of playing 4 lands, Chandra at least immediately impacts the board. It can kind of replace itself in terms of mana. It can kill 4 toughness creatures, which is very good if you're running into like Angels or some other effects, and it just provides you the card advantage. You have ways to tax your opponent with, or like paint your opponent with like Eidolon. You have a bunch of 1 mana of creatures that get bonus when you cast non-creature spells, card advantage in Electrostatic Blast as well to give you some card advantage. Static Discharge is a really nice scalable burn spell as well. This version of the deck's actually a little bit better against like the Izzet Wizard deck than the mono red creature deck has a really bad Wizards matchup after playing it. I've actually liked this version of the deck against the Wizards better just because you have a lot of ways to kind of interact with their board as well. Just a lot of kind of burn spells to hit their board, and then you also pain them with stuff like Eidolon. We then go to Selesnya Squirrel Twin. This is more of a budget version of the deck, so your mana base here should be Temple Garden, the Pathway, the Slow Land, the Pain Land, kind of mixed in with there. But the core of the deck is Heliod, Scurry Oak, and anything that gains life when a creature enters the battlefield, Luminar, Soul Warden, stuff like that. How it works is creature enters the battlefield, Heliod puts a counter on something, which is Scurry Oak. Scurry Oak then, when a counter gets put on it, creates a squirrel, which triggers the life gain, which puts a counter on Scurry Oak. You loop, kind of kill your opponent that way there. If you're interested in playing even this budget version, it's only 8 kind of 4 rares, 4 mythics. The mana base, like I said, it could be improved. You don't want 6 forests and a deck that's trying to cast 1-drops on one. So improve your mana base, I would say, is the biggest thing. This should be Bishop of Wings, kind of mixed into there as well. Sometimes you'll see Kyla's Reconstruction in this deck. You'll see Inquisitor Captain as well as alternate ways to... You basically want to find your combo as much as possible in this deck here. And this one was at 56% win rate. So for the best of 3 format, we're also looking at it. Again, like same time frame, but we only have 5,600 games played. And there's kind of 2 decks driving, and we'll kind of look into that. We have Mono Green Devotion and Rakdos Midrange. So the Devotion list in a Historic versus Explorer, you get Leyline of Abundance, which is banned in Pioneer and Explorer. This makes any of your like mana dorks tap for an additional mana. It's also a mana sink to put counters on your creatures. I've tried this deck in Historic, and I found it a little bit more fragile than Explorer. I just found there's a lot more targeted removal and ways to answer your earlier threats. Things like Divine Purge, lots of just 1 mana removal spells. Just seems like there's more ways that they could control the board. You're able to still generate huge amounts of mana. You still have your Karn package. Freyleys is kind of mixed into here, but you're playing stuff like Paradise Druid. There's less ways to draw cards in this deck, so like the games you had Leyline out on 1 and then you could cast an Elvish Mystic felt great, but you don't have like the Lovestruck Beast or secondary 3 mana spell to draw you cards off the Kiora. You're also playing another 4-drop here, which kind of limits what you're going to hit off of, right? Like a Leyline hit when you have Storm the Festival in play is not always the best. I think, and like you're trimming on the number of Wolf Willow Havens. Wolf Willow is a lot stickier of a card in terms of ramp. It's harder for players to get rid of the Wolf Willow as it is to get rid of one of these like Paradise Druid style effects. Like a Druid on 2 is not great. It's fine, but it's not great. Kind of mixed into there. Also, this list is on 21 lands, which you're still trying to cast 5 and 6 drops. I understand like you're trying to cheat mana, but I found at times I was stumbling on mana as well. So keep that all in mind if you want to kind of play this. You get the same kind of Karn wish board that's got an answer to everything and anything. And you're just kind of using that with the Nisa. Largely having played a lot of the Explorer version and then a bit of this Historic version, I've liked the deck in Explorer better. But if you have it in Explorer, it's pretty easy to play this in Historic. You could just get the Leylines, Freyleys if you want. I don't know how good Freyleys is. The version I was playing wasn't on Freyleys. I think it was just the 22nd land. To be honest, I'd probably play the 22nd land over Freyleys. Again, like tap an elf is good with the Leyline, but you're kind of reliant on these cards sticking around or being in your opening hand kind of thing. We then go to Rakdos Midrange, 65% win rate. And this is very similar to the list we just covered. However, this version's on 8 1-mana discard effects instead of the Cling to Dust for the best of 1 format. It's also on Molten Impact as a 2-mana removal spell. So if we look, they're instead of Angrass Rampage as a catch-all removal, Molten Impact, which oftentimes is like 2 removal spells in 1, which is really nice. So a good way to kind of deal with stuff like that. The main thing with this deck is you're playing Crucius, the alchemy card that's basically just like broken alchemy again. So this card here, 3 mana, 3/3. At your end step, you could discard a card from your hand, and then you either pick like, do you want more like a higher mana cost or a lower mana cost card, and then you seek it from your library to your hand. And you also get to create a treasure. So this lets you shape your hand. You can discard these like late game discard spells, and then get like a Shieldred or stuff like that. You're guaranteed if you discard a 3 mana spell that you'll get the Shieldred. So it's a way to tutor with the deck as well. Sideboard wise, you have like early removal for creatures, hand hate for the control matchups. Rahilda's good against like the kind of slower matchups, ones where either they just don't have a lot of removal, or against like blue-white control where they're going to be trying to play at instant speed. This kind of forces them and get to eat at their hand or at their library, get you some card advantage. Unlicensed Hearse for graveyard hate. Brotherhood's End as a sweeper and good against the artifacts matchup. Lily versus like the control matchup. Knight of Souls Betrayal is brought in against the Goblins matchup, and the nice thing is you can always tutor it with the Crucius. So you can take out the Shieldreds against the Goblins matchup because it's too slow. Always find Knight of Souls Betrayal, which kind of taxes them there. Shatterstorm destroys artifacts, so good against the artifact matchup. And then Chandra versus the Controller, heavy counterspell-based matchups as well. And then lastly, like I mentioned, I was playing a version of Burn in best of 3. Got 8-0 to Mythic with it. A lot of the games didn't feel close. There's a lot of like 2-0s in here. Yeah, good number of 2-0s. But basically the only difference from that version of the deck that we saw for best of 1, Chandra's main over the Torbrand, and I'm playing a couple copies of Meltdown. This was actually relevant in some cases. So instead of Play with Fire, because a lot of times you're targeting creatures with these spells. So Play with Fire's bonus of scrying isn't always used, but the Meltdown perpetually on stuff that keeps coming back from the graveyard is relevant. So if they have like a Croxa you can shrink, makes it a little bit more manageable. The thing that came up a lot when I was playing, ran into Squirrel Twin a couple times, Luminarch Veteran, they can't cast the backside because it's perpetually minus. So it deals with stuff like that. Anything with like recursive elements was pretty good to have this Meltdown. And I found I like that more. Still has the ability to go face, but it just kind of deals with like that perpetually damage sticks on it. Sideboard wise, Soul Guide Lanterns for graveyard hate, Molten Impact. So you can just basically turn into a control deck when you need to. You have Brotherhood's End. You bring in your Planeswalker package, Rolling Vortex for the life gain, and just against slower matchups, kind of tax them in that regard there. One thing I will say, because I ran into a couple like mono red mirrors, like I think it was this matchup as well. Don't keep in Rolling Vortex in a burn mirror. Like you want to be able to control how much damage you're taking, and just putting in a necessary clock on yourself. Like it should be fairly self-evident, but don't keep it in. Don't board it in. Just get rid of that card. It's not going to help you in that matchup. But in any case, that's it for Historic for the week. Let me know what you've been playing, what you've been liking. Some folks have asked me like I think this is fine for best of 1 as well. If you're running into a lot of life gain decks, you might want the Vortex main, but outside of that, I like this deck. It's fun to play. In any case, thanks for watching. Have a great one, and stay safe out there.